Hey everyone, I know it's been a couple weeks, but I'm back at it again. I've got some exciting new stuff for you. But before I get into it, I want to remind everyone that every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, um, I host a users group. And up until this point, it's been called the Cortex Users Group. Uh, and realistically, that's not going to change. It's going to continue to be a Cortex Users Group. Um, but I will take some time out of some of the upcoming uh, weeks to show off some of the stuff that I've been working on. Because as we all know, uh, the Sharewell end of life date is rapidly approaching. And at a certain point in time, you're going to stop putting new data into Sharewell. And Cortex, being an archive tool, being a compliance tool, an audit tool, um, eventually its lifetime is going to run out. It might not be for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, whatever your data retention policy is, however long you want to look back at previous incidents, previous knowledge articles, whatever it is that you have in Sharewell that you want to see again. But at a certain point in time, its utility is just going to start to dwindle, and um, that means that there will be less and less further development on it. Um, in a few years. Obviously, we're not talking imminently. Cortex is still alive and well. Cortex is as vibrant as ever. Got a lot of people using it, trying it out, looking forward to using it on their systems, and it's going to stay around. I'm going to continue to support it as long as people are interested in it and using it. So uh, all that to say, all that right up front, right? But I'm an engineer. I got to scratch that itch somehow. So I'm looking forward to phase two of Cortex, or at least Synapse software. And that's kind of how the channel is going to pivot a little bit. So I'll start sharing a little bit more sneak peeks for right now. Um, and that's what today is going to be. But every Tuesday is still going to be the Cortex users group, and there might be a little bit more of a sneak peek, a little bit more of a deep dive. If you have a particular question about something you've seen in one of these videos, feel free to bring it, even if it isn't Cortex related. I want to build a community around both Sharewell and Cortex, and what I'm about to give you a sneak peek of right now. So, a little backstory on this. Back, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago, I started writing some code. I wasn't exactly sure what it was going to be or what it was going to turn into. And about 2 years after that, I kind of realized that I built something that I thought was pretty compelling. Now, at the time, I didn't have the connections and the network that I have now, and I didn't really have the direction and the feedback from all of you that I have now. So it was kind of a solution in search of a problem. Um, but I knew that I always wanted it to be uh, more than an iPaaS, an integration platform as a service, um, more than just an automation platform, more than just a layer on top of a database. Um, I really wanted it to be a process automation tool, um, and that's what it is. And now, conveniently enough, there was a really awesome process automation tool that a lot of you used for many, many, many years, and it's going away at the end of 2026. I think we all know the elephant in the room. I'm talking about Sharewell. Sharewell was an amazing tool because it combined the the data storage and the interface to access that data with the automation capabilities that came in one steps. And that was a really powerful combination. Not to mention some of the triggering capabilities, automated processes and scheduler, and then webhooks were introduced a little bit later. Um, but even as the industry evolved, there were still more ways to integrate with systems and that sort of thing. Um, and that's why you see Avanti is integrating with an iPaaS to kind of flesh out their offering as well. Uh, And you see similar things in other IT tools as well. Um, Workflows, automations, that sort of thing. So without further ado, let me just demo the thing and give you again. This is a sneak peek into some code. It again, I wrote it many years ago. It hadn't been touched in a couple of years, uh, but I was talking to many of you, and I realized that you know what, you're describing problems, and I have a piece of code that I think solves those problems. So I want to dive into that a little bit deeper, and I may have already had a conversation with you, maybe talked a little bit about this, maybe you've seen it before. I did do some video demos of this code on this channel, in fact, several years ago. So you can actually find those if you go back in the back catalog. Um, it looks a little bit different because I've been making some changes to it, um, and I want to make it look a little bit more presentable. It did not. Design has never been my strong suit, so it didn't necessarily look the best. So hopefully you'll see that it looks just a touch better. I'm working on making it look a little bit better, even still, more presentable, more professional, even more intuitive, and starting to organize it around some of the common use cases that you all have talked about. Anyway, let's share that screen. Okay, so here it is. In the past, it's been called Slingshot. Um, it's a cute name. And I'll probably continue to call it Slingshot, at least for the time being. Um, but I'm going to start off with one of the pages or the interfaces that's been given a makeover recently. And this is uh, the schema editor is what I've been calling it. Basically, in Cherwell terminology, this is the create new business object screen, or the business object properties. Um, and as I've been thinking through some of these use cases, I've realized that probably at least 60% of what we build when we build, even the IT service management um, application and workflows, um, at least 60% of that capability is really defined at the business object level between how the fields relate to other fields within the business object or other business objects, um, how business object records relate to other records. So that's relationships up here, and I don't think this one has any relationships, um, but right relationships, um, and some of the rules around visibility and like default value and auto-filling values. Um, that was one of the things that in Cherwell was really powerful because it was driven by expressions. Um, Now, my tool isn't quite to that level, but that's actually one of the things that I want to add to it because expressions are really powerful, and especially when they're no code like Cherwell was. Um, it's it opens up doors that just aren't possible. So anyway, I feel like defining that at the business object level gets you at least 60% to where you need to be. After that point, uh, one steps and custom forms and dashboards and that sort of thing are almost icing on the cake. Maybe approvals and some automated processes are, the necessary additions, which really gets it from that 60% to that 80%, right? The Pareto principle, 80% or yeah, 80% um, takes 20% of the time. And, that first 20% that you implement gets you 80% of the way there. I think combination of business objects plus expressions and custom forms and a little bit of automation, gets you to that 80% mark. And then all the other stuff is icing on the cake, which is absolutely necessary. Not to say don't bother with that stuff, but I do think that where I am with this is it's almost there. Um, and I hope you'll give me feedback on how it's not almost there. So anyway, I do want to walk quickly through some of the things that are on this screen because this is an incredibly information dense screen. And this is one of the things that, to get philosophical for a minute, the the gap between pro code or code heavy and no code or codeless platforms um, is in the density of information, right? When you're writing code, if you're at all familiar with any programming language, even if it's PowerShell, um, the ability you have to express complex concepts in a very short and small amount of space, one line, one command, one statement, um, is incredible. English doesn't have that information density. Very few spoken languages have that level of information density. Um, and the struggle that no code uh, systems developers, platform developers have run into is uh, trying to maintain that information density or achieve that information density um, and still make it intuitive. In fact, make it even more intuitive than programming languages are, because programming languages, there is a learning curve. In some cases, it's very steep. Some are a little more gentle, but there is a learning curve. And the idea behind low code is that it should be a much gentler learning curve. No code, there should be basically no learning curve whatsoever. But at the same time, you still need that increased information density in order to express the concepts that we're trying to do. Okay, enough philosophy. Back to the screen. Okay, so obviously down the left side we have field names. So this is a bug. At the time I was building a bug tracker. This is public online staging.thoughtcolony.com. It's been there since way back in the day, all of 5 or 6 years ago. Um, so you can actually see this. You might not be able to see this level of detail, but being a bug tracker, and it was intended as a public bug tracker where people could report bugs against Slingshot, you'll see some of this functionality. You'll see some forms and that sort of thing. So anyway, a bug has a title, a status, assignees, which I'll come back to in a minute, created by ID, created date, description, then fixed in and found in versions. And then at the very bottom, you see it says add field. So obviously I could add more fields. I want to quickly talk about the different types that fields can be. I think this is actually a little more um, sophisticated than Cherwell in some ways. There are a few more options here. So text, integer, which I split out uh, whole numbers essentially and decimal numbers as opposed to just being a number. I don't remember if Cherwell did that. True or false, a GUID, which is a globally unique identifier, sometimes called a UID, UUID, universally unique identifier. Um, it is a true GUID for the GUID nerds out there. Um, and then list and object, date time, and enum. Now, one of the things that I did with this is I wanted to make the whole supporting business object and lookup table concept in Cherwell a little bit easier. It seemed kind of clunky and very involved. Um, Now that I've done it this way, I'm starting to see some of the value in how Cherwell did it, splitting it out into its own table. So there might be some sort of hybrid uh, option in the future. Um, but enum is basically a lookup table, right? It's a set of values where the field can have a very specific one of those values. And you can see this with status is an enum. And the options are new, confirmed, in progress, or testing. I think that's it. The other options being list or object. Um, list is basically a way to have one or more, I guess technically zero or more of a particular item, which SQL records, relational database records, doesn't really support. So in this case, we have assignees, which is a list, and the item is of type GUID. Now, the type GUID is important because it's actually a foreign key, in this case to the users table, created by ID, also a foreign key to the users table. And then there's also, in this particular business object, essentially, the fixed in version and found in version are also GUID references to a different table, the Slingshot versions table. Now, the one that's not represented by this example table is the object. And that's basically just a list of fields further encapsulated. So, like this entire record is technically an object. It's just the top level object, so we don't need to say that it's a type object. And if I added a field of type object, I could start adding additional fields to that subfield. Also something the SQL Server doesn't support directly. So we play some trickery in the back end to make it all work and perform it and that sort of thing. And then some of the other options that we have are visibility, which is used to automatically generate a form. So that's right, you don't have to create a form, though that'll be something we add very soon. But the system automatically generates a form for you without you even doing anything else. Aside from optionally, you can say whether this particular field should be editable on a form, read-only on a form, or just hidden from the form, not even included on the form. Some types of data have styles. So like text, for instance, can be plain text, which is just a single line text box. Multi-line, which is a larger text box. And then rich text, which is, as you might imagine, I think it's HTML, that sort of thing. Then we have your standard expected requirements, things like required. Is it required to save? Hashed, which is actually how we save passwords in the built-in authentication mechanism. So it's one way cryptographically secure hashing algorithm. So data comes in and gets hashed, and you can use that, you can use that to compare other data against. It is not encryption. So hashed might only be useful for passwords, but encryption is coming as well. Unique means that that field has that the value for that field has to be unique in that record. You can't have two records with the same value for that field, as you might expect. And then default value and update on every save are things like autofilling and then auto population. And the default is literally just empty string in the case of text. This is a little bit confusing. I think I reused a drop down for this, and some of the options didn't exactly make sense, but none and custom are the ones that make the most sense. In Cherwell, you can do expressions for this stuff, and that's something that we'll be adding here shortly. A foreign key, I already mentioned that. Of course, you can delete a field, and then of course you have relationships. Relationships are basically expression driven. It's called a filter. And right now there is a fairly simple code syntax for this, but that'll be changing. We'll have a no code editor for that as well. One of the unique things about Slingshot that Cherwell doesn't have is that you can easily add items to complex relationships. So if you have, and I believe I'm not lying, it's been a while since I wrote this, so I'm pretty sure that I'm remembering this correctly. You can create a record that's part of a relationship on the form, the auto-generated form. It basically has tabs for each of the relationships, kind of like a form arrangement. And if you add a record to that, it will automatically populate the field based on the description or based on the criteria in the relationship. So it's guaranteed to be part of the relationship. You can, of course, change those fields, um, and then it won't be a part of that relationship. But that's how that works. And then linked actions is something that kind of sort of exists in Cherwell, but kind of sort of doesn't. Um, List actions are actions that you can find down here by writing actions. That's a topic for another video. Um, that show up on what in Cherwell is called a grid. There's just a list of actions that you can perform against all of the items in the grid, some of the items in the grid, the selected items in the grid. But you basically have this is a list of actions that specifically shows up on the grid. And then form actions, same sort of thing, but shows up on the auto-generated form. So you have a list of fields down the left side and then a list of actions on the right side. I think that makes sense. I think that's fairly intuitive. And then, of course, you've got some system properties. So this is just called bugs, but I could add a display name, the field somewhere over here. That's something we're fixing right now. Did I mention we're giving this a little bit more fit and finish and making it a little more presentable? So we could say display name is bugs, and we could say the singular name perhaps is bug. And then the title field, if you don't select it, it's automatically detected. So things like title and name, and it might just be those two. But it tries to look for something that you've added to the schema that is, title-ish. In this case, we've specifically selected title. But you can select any field that is a string or apparently GUID field, but ideally string. So enums can't be chosen. Well, I guess they can. List fields cannot. I guess everything else. So anything that's scalar, anything that's a single value, not lists, not objects, and in reality, we could probably narrow down that list of fields a little bit more. So I'm going to hit save. And hey, look, it was saved successfully. So another example of something that we're going to update fit and finish wise. Instead of using the JavaScript alerts, we'll have little toasts in the corner or top right corner or somewhere, just so it's a little more subtle, it feels a little bit more modern. We're working on it. Again, this was a side project that I did, many years ago, and then kind of left by the wayside for a couple of years. So I'm pulling it back out because I think it has new life now. And yeah, all that to say, if you've made it this far in the video, thank you. I know it's a long one, and I'm only scratching the surface of what this tool can do. So if you've made it this far and you have thoughts, let me know. Drop things in the comments. Find me at the CORTEX users group. I mean, it could be a Cherwell users group too. And I do show up to those. I try to make it to a lot of the Cherwell users groups that are still happening. But the CORTEX users group, every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific. It's a Zoom meeting. There's a link in the description for an invite to get invited to that. Leave comments down below. Leave questions down below. There's also ways to get in touch with me and schedule some time with me. Ask me questions. Get more of a demo of Slingshot. Let's talk. I want to solve all the world's problems that occur in IT process automation. So that's where we are. Thanks for watching. Again, if you've made it this far, thank you very, very much. If you haven't subscribed, hit subscribe, hit the like button. This is a YouTube channel, and those likes and subscribes help immensely. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow, but definitely next week.